Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're watching us from and whenever you're watching us. Welcome to another episode of Conical Supremacy. My name is John Noreko, and I'd like to thank you all for tuning in today. Man, we got a great show, but I'm going to take a moment and introduce my co-host, the guy who thought this thing up, Mr. Doug Tornquist. Hey, Doug, how's it going, man?
Hey, great. How are you doing?
I'm okay.
Good day.
This week has been a little bit better. My lip finally healed up, so I was on the horn a bit this week, which is every time that kind of stuff happens, it just freaks me out. Like I'm getting old, and I'm not gonna come back, and all this kind of stuff. So I'm feeling a little bit better. We got lots of rain, so I was happy about that. Sprinklers have been off. Uh, it's the little things, Doug. It's the little things.
And it's only little things. That is
Well,
so good.
speaking of little things, you got to work this week. That's really nice.
I did, yeah. It was a little bit of the first part of my Easter job. There are a few, and I work for this church. I worked for them for Christmas, and they had me back for Easter. We did a little bit of recording, and then so got to drive out of town, about 100 miles south of here. It was great to see the ocean and get out and look, and it was great to play with people.
I was going to say you got to
A
play
little
with your regular mates in the quintet, right?
nice.
So that's kind of cool. You guys haven't probably played together in how long now?
Well, it was like that joke, where you what is that joke where you say, you play your New Year's Eve gig and then you say, "Can we leave our horns here till next New Year's?"
Yeah.
We played there for Christmas. Like, well, can we leave our horns here till Easter? Um,
uh,
but anyway, no, it was good, and I turned on the mic in here. I recorded a little bit yesterday. I put one of those wireless trios together. Um,
did you really? I thought we were going to record those this week. You got
you
tired of
probably
me?
no, no. I just want to see how it goes with this new rug. It changes the whole
Oh
uh,
yeah. So
environment.
did it change? Was it nicer?
Well, what I was really hoping was that it would make me play better.
Yeah.
Anyway,
If you figured that out, man, send it my way, man. Come on. That's all we. That's
that would be very yeah. The magic carpet. Yeah, if only. No, but it was good, and things are looking up. Everyone's getting their shots, and the city is opening up. So
Yeah, I mean
maybe,
we're red
maybe
tier now, as far as that's concerned. And what's really kind of encouraging for me is been this week kind of changed my outlook. Going, well, it's not going to be a question of if; it's going to be a question of when. And
you're going back
yeah,
to
yeah, and I'm really looking forward to it, man. I pulled up some videos the other day of the band just last year, and the band was sounding great. And I just want to go back, and I'm hoping everybody, especially everybody out in the audience there, we're not going back to normal. We're going back to a new thing, and I think we all need to embrace that, and especially to be thankful that we're going back to something,
hmm
because I know a lot of people who aren't after this whole debacle, and
Okay.
um, I'm very, very happy about that. Is that I've got somewhere to go as soon as they say yes, come back. Um, how was the studio this week? Did it drive you nuts? Everybody cool?
Everybody's great. Um, as I
Because
said, some people have real.
your students are kicking ass, man. I mean, truly, they're recording, they're doing their stuff. I mean, got to hear some stuff. You had master class last week with Carol, and
Yeah.
then everybody put up their stuff to so Carol can check it out, and everybody's doing great stuff over there, man.
Some people have really made the most of this time, and it amazes me. They're very excited about coming back to campus, but They've really made the most of this time. They've learned recording technique. They've done the most creative things. Some of them have really focused on their own playing. They're all sounding great.
Yeah, it's
So,
just, you know what? I hope when they come back to campus, and I'm really going to try to do this as well since I don't have a campus, uh, to not stop that rock rolling down the hill that's begun. I'm hoping that they do recording there. I hope that they, get together with their friends finally and record that and document this stuff, because there's some. I mean, when you and I were in school, there was some really cool stuff that happened that if it was only able to record back then in the Stone Age, it just. And now you can just show up with a backpack and you're good to go. It's just, I'm I'm just hoping everybody keeps the ball rolling on this thing, man, because the more music, the better. The more performance, the better.
oh, I think so. And I think it's been really clear that to be a 21st century musician, it's essential that you have the ability to share your sound, which, for the past year has been pretty much by electronic means only, which means recording yourself and making a credible representation of yourself. And I think they've really risen to the occasion. And it's been,
I
talk about an old dog learning new tricks. I mean, it's been really fascinating for me to feel like I'm at the beginning of something for a change. Having to
Well,
learn to
you
record.
you've talked about this, just take a second, and I because you've been talking about this for a bit, when we talk on the phone and stuff like that, and I can't say enough about your direction right now, because you've really kind of figured some stuff out for you, and I'm excited for you because here we are. Just for instance, we're going to start transcribing these podcasts that we've done, and this is our 21st one. But the reason being is that, of course, my co-host, who thinks up really cool stuff, is going to do a book, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
and the book's going to be
yeah.
on. As if I'm
Well,
trying to. Come
it's
on, Doug. Come on.
no, no, no. We are bringing this to life as we speak, and it's called the Tommy Johnson Project. It's needed to happen for a while, and I'm collaborating with some other people. And look, it's an outgrowth of my introduction, embracing of technology. Once you realize it's there for us, not to stop us, but actually to help us. So we're going to do a series of video interviews. We're going to transcribe them. We're going to compile. We might have a documentary. We might have a written document. I don't know. But
You know, when you and I were talking, we both were racking our brains, and this is for everybody out there. I don't know if you all don't know this, but there's never been a documentary, visual and audio documentary done on a tuba player. I
no,
looked, I can't find one, and there's been such great players over the years that it's amazing to me that that hasn't happened.
Richard
But
White.
well,
then again, then again, we play tuba, so everybody thinks, well, it's just the tuba. But I'm
well,
I'm I'm looking
there,
forward to this thing, man, because the more I think about it, the more cool it's going to be.
it's it's an outgrowth of our time here. And the super cool people we've met, and the question we have on this show for everybody is, what are you doing in quarantine? And it's like been so inspirational, you and I mean, there's so much to do. Playing the tuba is just part of it.
Absolutely.
There's a lot to do.
Well, speaking of inspiration, our guest today, um, I've known about since I was first starting out in college, and probably one of the premier instrumentalists of our time on our instrument, in my opinion. Um, and holy crap, has he just changed the tuba world? Um, you got anything else before I play this bump, Doug?
No, I think his reputation precedes him. And you know, I do get the sense he's one of those guys that everything he does extremely well, and he brings an incredible gusto and elan to the project. And from what I've seen, he is a complete master.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, hey, we're going to introduce. I think everybody will know who I'm talking about. So, Quinn, let's go ahead and play the bump to bring our guest in. The one and only Mr. Robert Tucci. Thank you so much for being here with us today, man. It is great to see you. Oh.
My pleasure. That was a perfect example of the fact that nobody's perfect.
Yeah. You know what? It sounded great to me, man. It's totally cool.
I mean, scale going up. That was beautiful.
I know. So how cool is this, Doug? We have Robert Tucci in the house, and you're coming to us from, are you in Bavaria or in Munich or?
Well, someone asked me where I was from. We were in Norway, and I said, well, I'm from Bavaria. It's close to Germany. It's a country close to Germany.
Yeah, there you go, man. There you go. Oh, man.
Thank you for joining us. I know it's very late for you. We had the time change here, so at least we're an hour closer to you, but there's an 8-hour difference, so it is definitely the late show for you. You know, we asked this question to everybody. What have you been doing since the lockdown? You know, what have you been creating in this time of quarantine?
Well, 30 years ago, I established a business to market instruments that we had developed, in particular the instruments made by BNS, and that led to the manufacture of mouthpieces. And I've run a full-time business since 1990, and be very frank about this. For 30 years, we were able to operate. I've always had at least 2 full-time employees. We would be able to operate the business at a small profit. I was never interested in making money; just wanted to run the business. But 2020 put a stop to everything. And so to answer your question, this past year, we've spent time to determine how to reorganize the business, to essentially to save the business, so that we continue doing what we've done in the past. There has been some government support, and we've done a considerable amount of reorganization. But what did happen, of course, affected. We say in German, meine Wenigkeit, me the least. Thousands of freelance musicians have not been able to work. And this has been a very serious problem, because we have in Germany 10,000 Volksfests a year, and daily number of events, from a small school orchestra performance to a football stadium with 100,000 people, of 14,000 events a day in Germany that have not taken place. And the music entertainment industry in Europe is the fourth largest industry, period. Fourth largest, period. It's worth about 483 billion euros a year. This business has been put on ice. So we're part of a business that's taken a hard blow. And for us, it hasn't affected us too much, and we'll be able to survive it. No problem there. We've always been flexible. But to ask you, this refers to everyone in our profession. Is that we were living in a time of great prosperity, and we were able to do anything we wanted to do, or almost. There was unlimited opportunity, and all of a sudden, someone pulled the switch. They switched the ground. So people must be very creative now. For some people, they have the financial background. For other people, they're suffering badly. They have to use their time wisely, and that's what I've been doing. As far as my playing was concerned, the last 15 years, I've been a fairly successful freelance play. There are no playing opportunities, but I still maintain my playing. Get up every morning with the same enthusiasm that I've had all of my life. And I always go back thinking the same things that what got me here, what kept me here, who helped get me there, what did they do? There's so many wonderful examples in our profession. The music is one thing that will survive. Music will always survive, and music is always the answer. Here we have a very strong traditional orientation. In Los Angeles, it's the entertainment capital of the world. It's an amazingly creative place, also in terms of, for example, design and thinking. The Apple computers come from the smartphones, everything, all comes from California. So creativity and diligence, and also to learn from those who have taught us, but also from the immense knowledge that we have, and also to help each other. Not everyone is fortunate. If you see someone has a problem, if you feel that you can help them, then do that. I always say to people, whether it's students always need help. At least they need advice. The student that you just point in the right direction and watch him go, that's one in 1,000. The other 999 come to us, to teachers, for guidance. At any rate, to answer your question, this past year, as required, I'm 80 years old now, but I have to think like someone 25. Otherwise, I could walk down the street and have a cup of coffee and forget about everything.
Yeah,
you see it right here. Robert Tucci, Canadian brass, new products, the shop. Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine, Bob. I think it's great that you said that, because for me, and I know I've talked to Doug about this before, get up in the morning, and if there's no work, then you go to work, and whatever that work is. And I'll tell you what, man, this last year that I adopted that philosophy, much to my wife and daughter's chagrin. So every day the horn's on the face. Every day's the horn's on, regardless, because both Doug and I mean, we used to have, the horn was on our face 5-6 days a week, and then all of a sudden that goes away. It's like, hey man, that's a part of me that just goes away. And I can't have that. I just can't have that. And for somebody like you who has played now, what, 60, 70, how long have you been playing tuba?
Well, the tuba was my first love.
Yeah, back at you.
So the tuba was my first love. My mother said that once. To answer your question, professionally, 59 years. My first job was interesting. Arnold Jacobs recommended me to Robert Whitney in Louisville, and I traveled to Louisville, and I played for Mr. Whitney and for Leon Raper and Paul Conrad, others in the brass section. And Mr. Whitney said, well, Bob, I suppose the tuba playing will be all right, but Mr. Hicks, who's leaving the orchestra, is also our property manager. And I said, oh, that's no problem. I can do that as well, So I never knew whether I was hired as the property manager, as a tuba player, The property manager paid more. That paid more.
That's so great, man. That's so great. Well, Well, we touched on this a little bit, and Doug, I'd like to kind of go to this right now. Quinn, can we pull up the photo of him in the Rudy factory for a second? So this one right here, I was fortunate enough to, as a kid, to meet Rudy and actually buy one of the BNS prototypes from him. And here, this is you and Rudy or Gerhard here in these pictures, but you guys are just figuring it out right here, right? And was this where it started for you, man? As far as getting in there and figuring it out and trying to make the best instrument that was possible?
I was always blessed by my birthday was the 22nd of November, and that's the Santa Cecilia's Day, and Santa Cecilia is the patron saint of musicians, actually of choral singers, but she's always looked down upon me at the right moment. And we were looking for...
You know why, Bob? Because, and I'm just going to throw this out, that's because you are a De Meister singer, bro.
But I was sent to Rudy Meinl in 1970 to begin work on tubas, and Rudy always lives in work clothes because Rudy always worked from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And he met me at the station in a business suit. And here was this fellow this young fellow from Pennsylvania who was coming and was supposed to change the world. But Rudy he's retired now. Rudy's 81 now, and his health is all right. He's had some problems like everyone at that age, but Rudy is what we call a body and soul tuba maker. His whole life was, and everything in the shop they built. They built the walls, they built the workbenches, they built all the tools, and they built the tubas. And at the time, everything was done there by hand. Everything was done by hand, and that's shown in those photos, the bending of parts and the preparing of parts.
Bring us back up.
So we started, the first tuba that was, I took Rudy to Vienna in 1971 to meet Arnold Jacobs. And he looked at Arnold Jacobs' tuba. He says, "Oh, I can build a tuba like that." And so we went back to his shop, and in a few days, he put the 5/4 C together, the big,
wow,
large, yeah, in a few days. And it was amazing how well he could do that and so fast. But Rudy and I have been good friends, and I have, I can say, if you're interested, I have quite a bit of film information about Rudy. And we also arranged for him to receive the ITA Lifetime Achievement Award several years ago.
As he should.
Yeah, and Rudy was unable to travel. His wife of many years had passed away, and she was very ill at the time. And but I did present that to him. But that started it. That started with Rudy Meinl.
So it was. So with Rudy, so this is the 1970s, and then we were talking prior to the show starting. Like I told you, I've been playing your mouthpieces since I was in high school. And can we pull that up right now? When was the love affair with mouthpieces and trying to get them just the way you thought they should be? When did that start?
Well, that started at the same time. In the same area, Rudy's in a town called Diesbeck, which you said you've been there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and at Neustadt, which is a major city there, Bruno Tilz was there. So I went. Bruno passed away 4 years ago. He was 84, still working almost every day, Bruno. And so I went to Bruno Tilz, and I had some old Hellebergs, and I wanted to make a good F-tuba mouthpiece. At that time, there weren't many people in the United States playing the F-tuba, and there were even fewer good mouthpieces. And I collected various mouthpieces, and I went to Bruno, and we worked quite a bit. And the ninth one was promising. So that was M9, meaning mouthpiece number 9. And that became later the PT9. And then we had to give it a new name finally. It was a lucky mouthpiece, so we gave it 64, the lucky number. And so I began making mouthpieces, and mostly for the built American concepts. the experience in the brass wind manufacturing is if you develop a product for the American market, the American market has been very progressive and also very, very critical. But if you make a product that is popular and successful in the American market, you can sell it worldwide. And Hollywood's a very good example of that, of course. They make a good product and sell it worldwide. And, the major change with our mouthpiece production was took place in 1995. We couldn't make enough mouthpieces on that old equipment. So I began using modern equipment, CNC. And you have much greater control over the design and, in particular, consistency. And then you can produce mouthpieces. A good mouthpiece has to be affordable. You can't make a one-off for $400, but we can run 200 a day. My mouthpiece days at the factory usually start at 8 o'clock, and I have a very fine engineer because the machines are very complicated. They have to be maintained, but they have a life of their own. Cold in the morning, hot at night. And I have instruments there. And we have a very fine collection of master models because the musicians change. You might have had a bad night's rest, or drank too much, or ate too much, or had a bad cold one thing. But the master models are made out of metal, and so we always compare what we're making to what we considered the best at the time. And my mouthpiece manufacturing working days at the factory is 8 o'clock. The staff goes home at 4, and I stay there and run the machines till about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And,
Bob, what are you doing, man? I mean,
well, you have to test the mouthpiece.
Well, I know you do, but you've put your time in, man. You don't. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. You are a driven individual, and I have nothing but ultimate respect for you, my friend. It's just holy crap. I mean, are you still doing that to this day? I mean, like yesterday, did you go into the shop and work and try something?
No, I work at the shop all the time. Yeah. Our mouthpiece factory is in a different location, and I usually a mouthpiece session is to leave home on Sunday afternoon to be at the factory on Monday morning, and usually stay 2, sometimes 3 or 4 days, and we produce whatever we need at the time. And 2020. We were very restricted in travel, but we've been able to maintain our production, and also we have everything in stock. Because people nowadays, it's this push button smartphone order. They don't want to wait 6 months for something, and so we keep everything in stock. At any rate, to sum this up on the mouthpieces, I always listen to what people say, and I listen very carefully to people when they play, and then we go back to the factory, and I've digested that here, and try to make the stuff better. The other thing is that the repertoire we have nowadays didn't exist 50 years ago, or 85% of it didn't exist, and the standards of playing and the standards of teaching are much higher now. The standards of playing much higher because of great teachers, and instruments have changed a lot too. At the beginning, if I go back 50 years, we had to fool around with the mouthpieces to accommodate essentially deficiencies in some of the instruments. But now there are many fine instruments. And but to sum this up, tubas are very long and mouthpieces are very short. And to put them together and make it work, you have to know what you're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, Bob, like I've said, I've played your mouthpieces now for, well, let's see, I was 13. So it's been 45 years that,
time for change.
No, totally. They have changed. And what I find fascinating though, is my current mouthpiece that I have on my C right now, I have had that now for 25 years, and that's the one for me. That's the one, and we'll talk after the show because I want to get another one, but but I want the old version.
The old version, we can do that.
No. So but there's another product up here, and can we show that right now, Quinn? It's the Chops Dyno system.
Oh yeah.
So tell me about this. What I mean, first of all, Chop's dyno system. So what I mean, you look at it and you just go, yeah, right. But tell me why this, Bob?
Um, my studies, my involvement also involves thinking, and how does something work, and essentially it deals with acoustical properties. But um, when we do something, we never buy the feature, we buy the benefit. And if you manufacture something and produce something, it's not the feature. People don't care so much about the quality of silver playing, is that when they blow into a mouthpiece, they want to have a certain effect. The Chop Dyno fits a bit into the situation we have, that people are limited performance opportunities, and in some cases even limited practice opportunities. The longest Chop Dyno adds considerable air resistance to the tone production, and it's very simple to use. Just pop it in the mouthpiece, and you can buzz very comfortably. We have many amateurs here that have trouble buzzing in the low register. That helps. It's an excellent buzzing tool, and it's also a very good trick tool if you have to play something very soft. Just stick that in there, and you can blow about mezzo 40 well into the comfort zone, well into the comfort zone, and have a secure response. Or if you have to make a diminuendo, one thing or another, it's a playing. It helps you do something. It makes something easier. On the instrument, of course, if, for example, take Mahler first, little solo, stick that in there. It's a low volume solo. If anything, the long cylindrical section gives much greater control over intonation. So to start off, it's a very good buzzing tool, and it can even work as a mute. And if you have, we do a lot of traveling here on trains and carried a tuba or two tubas and a mute. It was really interesting. You can stick that in there, and it makes the tuba sound like a mute. It reduces the sound so much that it's like a mute. You can change the color. The smaller ones are more experimental. You can change the sound of the instrument a lot. If you look at a traditional romantic orchestra, the string sections sound about the same whether they play Mozart or Beethoven or Bruckner or Strauss. But one has to keep in mind that these works are all composed for different orchestras and totally different orchestral sound concepts. If you take the Czech concept, Dvorak, the German, the English, a tuba player has to be most flexible in terms of sound quality, more flexible than any other instrument in the orchestra. You might have Midsummer Night's Dream and Bruckner 7th on one program. For the violinist, it's Midsummer Night's Dream and Bruckner 7. But a tuba player, it's two worlds of sound. Using those short adapters, you can change the sound slightly. You can make it brighter. You can make it it's not an expensive accessory, and it's not only, it is a bit experimental. The basic use is for practicing, but that might save your neck on a show. I once had a student. We put him in for the New World, the famous nine notes, and he had a terrible F tuba with a bad low register, and the trombone section says, "We don't want that guy." So I gave him one of these. I says, "Go in there," and it gave him so much control over the low notes, the volume, and the security response. It saved his neck. That little piece of brass saved that kid's neck, and he went on to,
I find that, once again, Doug, here we are, Mr. Robert Tucci, the guy who thinks of stuff that nobody else has thought of. But it's interesting, Bob. We were talking to Mickey Robleski a couple weeks ago, and about that sound concept thing, and I don't think a lot of people take that into consideration. And I think you nailed it right on the head. Where, and Doug and I have talked about this at length, like especially in opera, when do you play which cimbassa do you play, right? Or am I going to play tuba on this one because some orchestras would have had tuba, or am I going to play this or that or the other thing? All these different sound concepts, and here you are with a little piece of brass that you just put into your horn and you can change everything. I mean, this is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant stuff, man. Just right, Doug?
Well, Arnold Jacobs usually played most of his work on a very large instrument, and he had 10 or 12 different mouthpieces with him. And he said it was cheaper to change the mouthpiece. Mouthpieces are cheaper than tubas. And you have to be very advanced to be able to change mouthpieces a lot and still sound good and reliable. One small benefit of this chopped dyno system is that you stay with 99% of the equipment you know very well, the same mouthpiece and the same tuba. The influence is less than changing from a very shallow cup mouthpiece for the Beadlow to a monstrous mouthpiece for Bruckner's 8. You can use it's a small tool. It's not expensive. It provides the benefit. But we've had worldwide. We've had an Americanization of the brass orchestral sound. And if you go back, I remember when I went to Vienna in 1962. I came essentially from the Chicago School of Brass Playing, and I knew other orchestras as well. And you went to Vienna, it was like going back 200 years.
There he is.
But what has happened now is that many brass sections play American style, and they do it very well, and it can be very, very impressive. But if you think very seriously about the music, we have to make music is sound with the right sound. And if you listen to the orchestra from Dresden or Leipzig, Vienna, Berlin, it's a different sound because they're very, very, very determined to maintain their individuality.
Doug, has there been resistance to new instruments? I mean, does that also include maintaining the old instruments in the orchestra? I mean,
well,
brass players, we don't.
There's a lot of people spent a lot of time and money and cut up a lot of old instruments. The biggest problem with the old instruments is that they're either worn out or not available, and some were quite good and some weren't so good. I think instruments nowadays, a tuba player with little money in his pocket has a selection of instruments which is absolutely can cover all possible areas of musical endeavor. And a good tuba player doesn't have to. A good tuba player needs in an orchestral. He needs a good F tuba, a good C tuba, and a good B flat tuba, and perhaps a tribassa, depending on what he's doing. You need 3 instruments or 4. Right. Trumpet players usually have a whole bag full, but tuba players have to spend a lot of money to buy their instruments. And the best thing about an instrument is find a good one and stay with it. Don't go out and say, I'm going to try this and try that, try this and try that. Get a good instrument and stay with it.
You're looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've played one for years and I wore it out. This.
But to get back to Rudy, Rudy was really hard-headed at the time. And in Bavaria, we sort of roughed ourselves together on that. I went on with Hirschbrunner thereafter. That started in 1963, and Hirschbrunner was able to build some absolutely wonderful instruments. And one big problem was to recreate the 6-quarter tuba. There were only 2 at the time. Arnold Jacobs owned both, and he had worked with the Holton company, and Holton made an instrument of various quantities or various qualities, and but we were able to realize with the Hirschbrunner instruments, they made the original instrument of 35 tubas within 4 years. Made a lot of people happy with those instruments. And then the most successful project was with BNS, because there was something very important. They have in Marknerkirchen and Klingenthal a factory where they make everything themselves. They don't buy parts from anyone else. here's Bernard buying valve sections here and bells there and bows here, one thing and another. He's a good cook. He's a good cook. He buy different things and make good instruments. But the other factor in Martin was the tradition. Those people have a tradition in instrument making that was not affected. Communism and socialism was awful for those people to live there. But their traditions were maintained and strengthened by adhering to what they'd been doing there for 200 years. And with BNS, it took also other challenges. Working within that system at the time until 1990 was very, very difficult. Very difficult. Very difficult. It was dirty politics. But we were able to achieve with BNS a level of, particularly F2 with C2 was a level that hard to beat. Really fun.
I agree. I still have
hard to beat. Yeah, and it was Gerhard Meidel in 1990. At the time when the wall became coming down, together with people that we were looking for a way to save the company. And we had various options, and one or two were very good, but it was Gerhard Meidel that saved that. And Gerhard worked, he arranged millions of euros of financing, and Gerhard was had to rebuild the country. He was working 16 to 20 hours a day to rebuild that company. And if there's any one single person that saved BNS, it was Gerhard Meidel. And he integrated his own company, Melton, into that. And later, Buzz and Hawks, euphoniums and compensated tubas are built now. They most recently took over the Courtois. Courtois was still building several hundred trombones a year. So they built the Courtois trombones now at BNS. The company had to be refinanced, and the present ownership is Buffet, and that caused some restructuring, but it's all working very well. And I must say that the instruments we in the past, I was going to the factory usually about 9-10 times a year for several days each time, and always inspected everything. Inspected every instrument that we sold, and to the American market, and also for our own consumption here. And I must say now that the quality has been, in spite of everything that's happened, the quality is still very, very high, very, very high.
It's amazing.
You can buy a BNS instrument and be confident, and also if there's a problem, they take care of it.
Hey, Bob, I'd just like to take a second and kind of switch gears a little bit, if you don't mind.
No problem.
And the reason why I bring this up is I would love for you to talk about your career a little bit, if you don't mind. I think the audience would really love to hear about it. But I want to put up a picture first. Quinn, put up the Lotus. So this is one of my favorite pictures of all time. So there's your Lotus, and there's your horn. And is that how you went to the gig?
Well, my father was an automobile dealer. It was a traditional small town automobile dealer that could fix anything.
Bring up the Roadrunner.
And so I grew up in the automobile business. And in the summer,
car. Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry, Bob.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
My father was in the automobile business, and I spent a lot of time in his shop. I learned to be a fair mechanic, and we had some farmers friends in those days. During the harvest time, my brother and I and others would go and work on the farm, and it was usually pretty hard work. And my father said to me, he says, "Well, do you want to be a farmer?" I said, "Well, I don't know. It's nice out there, you know. It's nice. It's interesting." And he says, "I'll tell you something about farmers. That's 80% work, and that's 80% work, and 10% brains, and 10% upfront, you know." And I said, "Well, what you do, auto mechanic?" And of course, he says, he says you need 80% brains, and you need a lot of brains and still some work and a little bit up here." And I said, "Well, what about musician?" He says, "Oh." At any rate, we had a musical family. My father played the trumpet and the cornet. My grandfather played the guitar, classic guitar. And we grew up in music. We grew up with music. And for some reason, I love low sounds and low instruments. Oh, there you go, working on the car.
Yeah.
We put some. I'll send you another photo. We put some. That car looks much different now than it did last year. At any rate, my first teacher was Harold McDonald of Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra, and Harold was a wonderful tuba player and one of the most enthusiastic people about the things he loved. And I was so impressed with the way he did. Harold got me into the music business. And he told me one thing when I went to Chicago in 1958. He says, Bobby, he says, don't go into this business with stars in your eyes. That was very good advice. And that led to Arnold Jacobs. And I think that I was a PETA for Arnold Jacobs, and he recommended me for that job, the job in Louisville, to get him out of his hair. And later in 1974, Harold and the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra was in Montreux, and I was there with the Vienna Philharmonic, and we played the Bruckner Seventh with Karajan it was Zarathustra with Karajan and Bruckner Seventh with Berman, and then later in 1974 I was in Chicago with the Berlin Philharmonic again with Karajan and Bruckner Seventh. So if my two teachers were ever proud of their boy, that was the day.
So Bob, the story goes. Doug, tell me the story that you and I have been talking about with Bob. So was it you got to? You tell it, Doug.
Well, I would think you were offered the Detroit Symphony, but instead you decided to go to Europe, right?
No, not really. In 1962, I had auditioned for the Army Band, and I didn't really want to go in the military service. And Paul Kling, the concertmaster at the time anyway, but Paul says, he says, go to Vienna. He says, you want to see a musical city, a city that thrives on music, go to Vienna. So I applied to the Academy of Music. And I was in Vienna for 4 years as a student. In fact, I was registered as a draft dodger. They called me the draft dodger. And when I got to Vienna, I began working there immediately. I landed in the I was there in September. In October, November, I began playing with the orchestras, and I had a contract with the Vienna Symphony Orchestra, a wonderful orchestra. And then I auditioned for the Vienna State Opera in 1963. In 1966, I returned. I went into the Army Field Band for 3 years. And but to answer that question about Detroit, Eric Leinsdorf had conducted in Vienna, and I knew him and he knew me, and he wanted me to audition for the Boston Symphony Orchestra, but I couldn't do that because at the time I didn't have a draft. I hadn't fulfilled my military commitment, but what I did do was I returned to Vienna in 1970, and then looked for employment. My first employment was in Kassel, and then the year later here at the Bavarian State Opera, and that was the sort of the rebirth of a career. After those 3 years in the Army, and they don't pay you a lot of money in the Army, and I wasn't penniless, but I sort of had to start the career again. The first time was out of Chicago and Louisville and into Vienna, and then after the Army I had to start again. So it was mostly hard work. I mentioned this once at Herseth once said, someone asked Herseth how he became such a great trumpet player. He said, very simple, 5% talent, right? No, 5% inspiration, and 90% perspiration.
Oh shit!
That's what
it is.
And I think that's for any musician. Is that you have to be inspired when not at Friday night when the concert starts at 8 o'clock. You have to be inspired on Monday morning at 9 o'clock when you take your horn out of the bag and start to warm up and play. You have to be inspired, have a lot of musical energy in what you're doing. But most of it is work and more work and using your brain. You have to use your time wisely. The body only does what the brain tells what to do. But I was fortunate that many things I missed about the United States. You saw this this vitalization of the tuba come up, TUBA, ITA. Now you have over 300 people, full-time teachers teaching tuba. You have a whole world of tuba playing that didn't exist at the time, and a lot of that I missed. Some of it we've been able to, most of it we've been able to recreate here in Europe. It took a lot longer, but my true love was orchestral music, opera music. So I became an orchestral musician. That was it.
And we're very thankful that you have, because, man, you just can play. And speaking of inspiration, I'd like to play something right now, the Wilhelm, of Mr. Tucci in a solo setting, and dude, you sound wonderful. And this is the Wilhelm, right?
Yeah.
Correct. And Quinn, can we pull that up? I want to play like the first few minutes of the first movement, and wonderful playing, and the piano player is spot on. Do you want to set this recording up at all, Bob? When was this done?
Well, Rolf Wilhelm was a wonderful gentleman. Rolf Wilhelm composed music for 68 full-length films, and he could compose any kind of music. And I got to know him here with studio and radio and television productions. And I had in mind this basic structure, for example, of like the Von Williams, with a first movement in 2/4 with a long cadenza, and the second movement in slow 3/4, and the third movement in 6/8. And I talked to Rolf about this, and I said it shouldn't be too difficult, and it has to be something that can be played by many people with piano or with winds. And so Rolf came back. He wrote that. I visited him in his home a couple of times. We worked through it, and he was very, very, very proficient with his ability to compose, and he put the piece together. The interesting story was that I looked for an opportunity for a first performance, and that was 1983. And Rolf and I were copying out the music at 5 minutes to midnight, and I had been in communication with Brian Bowman, and we were run very close. And Colonel Arnold Gabriel said, "I'm sorry, we can't do this. We don't have time to rehearse it." And I put a lot of pressure on Colonel Gabriel to get that piece played, get it on the program. And afterwards, Brian said to me, he says, "Tucci," he says, "you're the only tuba player that ever gave a full colonel an order." But the piece is very popular. The piece became very popular, and it's fun to play. And also, it's a piece that for students to develop themselves. It's 3 full octaves. It has many kinds of music in it. It has a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It requires a certain amount of sensitivity in the second movement. So Rolf was very good at fulfilling the design criteria.
Well, hey,
he traveled to Washington in 1983 for that performance. In fact, that led to the Concertino for Euphonium, which is a beautiful piece. And he also wrote brass quintets. He said to me, "Tucci, you're the inventor of Rolf Wilhelm, the composer of brass music."
Well, hey, let's check a little bit of this out right here, because it's something everybody needs to hear. Go ahead, Quinn. Let's roll. Oh, wait. Oh, shoot. Quinn, you should have let the cadenza go, man. Anyway, yeah. Bob, throughout my career, you know, I've been fortunate enough to been able to listen to you throughout my career. And one of the things I love about your playing, and one of the things that I try to do as well, is the romantic nature of when you're playing solo pieces, and how romantic you make the instruments sound. You're not afraid of the nice vibrato. You're not afraid of this, and the contrast, not only in dynamic but in articulation and things like it's just. And Doug and I have talked about this a lot. You're approaching it as if you're the opera basso or the baritone in opera, and I just can't say enough, man, and how wonderful it is to listen to that.
Well, thank you for the flowers.
No. I mean, seriously, I think the tuba is a very romantic instrument, and everybody should write that stuff for us. And I have to find stuff that's been written for other instruments that are romantic to try to make the tuba sound romantic. So I just, Doug.
It's just the style. I mean,
yes.
I don't hear people play like that with this kind of bravura style. And you're sustaining and blowing, and it's so even up and down the instrument. And those low notes. I mean, I don't think that was a big tuba, but man, what a sound you get in the low register. Just what a great presentation of that piece.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I got to know, what F were you playing on that?
Oh, that was a PT-10.
That was the 10?
PT-10 with a PT-64 mouthpiece.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's more or less something I had my hand on beginning in.
Yeah, so it's just a horn laying around, right? No big. Oh man,
that was a borrowed instrument, by the way. I had borrowed
that
recording was made in Japan, and I didn't fly to Japan with the instrument, but someone was kind enough to lend me one, and I brought my own mouthpiece. That I did. I didn't borrow the mouthpiece.
You bring up with the PT horns, and I've played a few of them, and I will say one thing: they all play very well, but they all play very similar. So that wasn't a big stretch for you to borrow somebody else's PT-10, already having one, and knowing how it worked, right? I mean, it's like, because that they are so consistent.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like cooking a good dinner, is that you have to have good basic ingredients. If my mouthpiece celebrates the 50th birthday, the BNS F tuba dates back to the early 60s, and the one called the Model Symphony, which is pretty much the same instrument, and That instrument was based on an old Cervini design, the short lead pipe, the progressive dimensions in the valve section, and fairly large instrument. And that was developed by Herbert Fischbach at BNS. And I was brought in there in 1983. And we began updating the instrument immediately. The receivers were too small. They had a terrible heavy nickel silver crown on the bell, which deadened it. And that evolved in the instrument we had. We had a lot of problems with low register response. But in time, there have been many changes to that instrument. And many changes. Most of it people can't see. They said it looks the same. It doesn't look the same. If you start measuring, you'll see that it's quite different. And the instruments that are built now play very, very well. And we've got them pretty well straightened out and been very successful. The BNS F-tuba, the parent Tucci BNS PT10, is the most widely used large bore rotary valve tuba worldwide. And they were making several hundred a year. Last year crippled the scene a little bit, 220. But but an instrument is really, it's what you put into it, what comes out. If it's a good amplifier, then it's easier. If it's a good amplifier.
You bring up the same thing that Arnold used to tell me when I was a kid, which was like, the horn's a horn, man. You got to. It's what you bring to the horn. It's the person behind it, and he would sit there and yell at me all the time about that, going, "Stop sounding like me. I want to hear what you sound like." And to this day, that was one of the things that still kicks in my head. And when I'm teaching, and I tell my students, is like, I don't want you to sound like me. I want to hear what you sound like, and that personality and that thing. And let me tell you something, man, because you. I can always tell when it's you playing, and I mean that in a good way, because there's so much personality there, and it's always been that way. I mean, Doug, you and I have gone round and round on this, and this whole sound issue and stuff, and you can sound like this, and that's not how you get work. You sound like yourself, and you bring yourself to the gig as a musician, right, man?
Well, I think a point comes in every musician's life when you have to make that decision, like, okay, what is my sound? And then from that moment on, you orient your practice sessions to that. And that might be a great sound, that might be a great sound, but here's my sound. I go through this with my students. It's a very uncomfortable moment. You know, a lot of people want to be told what the answers are. This is that moment when you have to find the answers inside yourself. And I think I am agreeing with you that yes, it's finding your own sound and being the best at that.
Well, yeah, go ahead, man. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm done.
Oh, okay.
That's all I have to
say. I was going to say, there's a reason why you're on film score after film score, is because you bring that personality to the session and to that score. And there's a reason why Mr. Tucci here has been basically one of the guys in Europe for, half a century, because you have that sound, that personality. And in the jazz setting where I live, I try to bring that to the thing, because I'm working in two different situations as a backup person and then as a soloist too. And I really view that as two different things. There's the solo sound and then there's the rhythm section sound. And I wish everybody would go after that. I wish they would find that thing, because I'd be so much more interested in listening to people play. It's just like, I don't need to hear the Bach cello suites done like so-and-so again. I want to hear what you have to offer as far as that's concerned. And, anyway, here I go off on my high horse again. So, Mr. Tucci, Quinn, can we pull up the Bobo that the friends of, if you don't mind, let's see. No, not that one, Quinn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there's the young Mr. Tucci right there and everything, but and there's the old horn, there's the car, there's you being silly. Oh, so first of all, go back one. So Mr. Harvey Phillips, one of the quintessential icons, along with yourself, in the tuba world. Um, when did you first meet Harv, and can you give me a little bit of story about that, if you don't mind, please?
I met Harvey before I met him. When I was a student in Chicago, the Midwest Bandmasters Clinic was a relatively small affair. It was held at I think at the Palmer House or one of the hotels in Chicago at the time. And the Con company had just introduced a fiberglass sousaphone. And the introduction to the Con's sousaphone was that there was nothing on the stage, and all of a sudden, from off stage, a sousaphone flew through the air. It landed on the floor. That's how that was how the instrument was. But at any rate, to answer your question, they had an audio playback system with earphones, and I picked it up and listened to that, and it was Harvey playing the Vincent Youmans karaoke, and that was my introduction to Harvey Phillips. The karaoke with the band that he had put together, a studio band he'd put together, the All-Star Concert Band in New York. And that's when I first met Harvey Phillips. That was just wonderful to hear that. And then later, in 1962, I traveled to the first Jackson Hole Music Festival, where I was also the property manager and tuba player. But I traveled via Aspen, and I met personally Harvey in Aspen. It was in 1962, and we became good friends. We had the honor of his visit twice here in Munich, and that one picture of 1974 was here. And then the second time he came when the Oktoberfest was on. So we were able to do that well. Harvey was incredible. Harvey's incredible.
No, Quinn. There you go.
There you go.
So Mr. Roger Bobo. So when were you hanging out with Roger? Was that in the 70s as well?
Well, Roger's first recording, which I believe was in 1960 or 61. In 1961, Mr. Roger Bobo plays tuba. I think that's the most significant single recording in the history of the tuba, because he played on one recording, one LP. Roger played everything from top to bottom in so many different styles. And it opened up our brains and our eyes and our ears to what can be done with the tuba. In those days, we were fooling around with our C tubas and this and that. You either studied with Bill Bell or Abe Torchinsky, or you studied with Arnold Jacobs or someone you studied somewhere, and it was mostly C tuba and not much solo playing. And Roger, it was absolutely amazing. So I first met Roger on the basis of his recording. And then I was in Amsterdam with the Vienna Symphony Orchestra when Roger was there, and I met him then. And also that one picture was 1976 in Los Angeles. And then Roger, of course, moved here. I met him on various occasions here. Absolutely amazing person, Roger. Absolutely amazing. And if you talk about anyone who has survived by conviction to his profession and to his art, that's Roger Bobo.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to have Roger chime in with us a couple of shows again, and it's always an extreme pleasure to have him around. What about let's go on. And there's a couple of other ones here. So this one right here, that's Terry, right?
That's Terry Cravens and Art Hicks. Yeah.
So, I mean, when was this?
Well, Art Hicks was a native of Louisville and was in the tubas of the Louisville Orchestra, and he had the opportunity to play with the Israel Philharmonic, and he said once in his life, he wanted to play in a full major symphony orchestra. So I was hired to replace him then, and then he came back to Louisville, and that photo was taken. Terry and Art were very good friends. Art's wife was a charming California girl. She was a cellist, by the way, and the picture shown with his son Matt, and that was Terry and Art, and they remained. That picture there, you'd have to ask Terry, but that was, I see Matt was a little fellow then. That was probably maybe 1963, 1964.
Wow, man. I mean, we could go on forever and talk about the people that you've friends with and that you have sat there and influenced, us being some of them. But unfortunately, we're coming short on time right now. And I just like to have Doug kind of ask the last couple questions here
Yes, sir.
because I've just been, being John.
Been fascinating for us. If you've had this, unique overview of the tuba world. I mean, you have been in Europe and in the best place to be a tuba player, which is Germany, and then you had arguably the best job, the Bavarian State Opera. And what have you seen as far as the developments and the changes in the world of tuba and tuba players? I'm just really curious what answer you might have for that question, because you've kind of been in the middle of it and you've seen it all. And my perspective has certainly been American. I'm very fascinated with American history, but I have not. We in America always think there's so much more going on in Germany for brass players, specifically tuba players, and you've been right in the center of it. And what do you think the most significant developments have been over the past 50 years, your time there in Germany?
In a way, I was a pioneer here. At one time or another, there's still some of us remaining, but one time or another, there were 20 American tuba players in Europe, and there's still a few of us that are still active. But this led to other players on other instruments, horn, trumpet, and trombone, and I assisted many people in establishing themselves here, and not always to the pleasure of some of our native colleagues. Some people took offense by the fact that I was bringing in foreigners and bringing in nothing. But I spent just as much or more time with my German students as I did with my Americans. Americans, I didn't have to spend too much time with them. Most of them were very well prepared. At any rate, to answer your question, they don't need us anymore. We had a tremendous development in brass playing, and I'm talking 40 years, not 50 years. But to answer your question, you listen to these wonderful musicians, say from Germany or Austria, for France, and Scandinavia, also pioneers, Michael Lind and other players, Jens Bernlaas and people from, but their musical traditions. We're talking about romantic music. About the tuba was not a classic instrument. The tuba didn't exist at the time of Haydn and Mozart. It began with Berlioz and Mendelssohn, but the people's background, their musical background is what makes them musicians, whether they play the zither or play a tuba. And I remember at the tuba symposium in Budapest in Hungary, there were young students there that were so musical because it was a system. The system is so musical that they're bound to be great musicians, whether they play the clarinet, the violin, or the tuba. The traditions are very, very important. America has its own tradition. You have a complete different traditions in brass, a great tradition in brass as well. But people have to the criteria of success are based on good musical character. And if anything, as far as there were many people here, Americans, who taught the Germans or the Austrians, the others to play, Rex Martin, Roger, others, those of us who have taught here. They don't, as we say now, they don't need us anymore. Significant at the time was the fact that Canadian brass and Philip Jones always sold out here by young, enthusiastic brass players. Now we have, on the basis of that, many, many fine brass quintets. And and many fine brass ensembles. So we're pioneers, people that were creative, that wrote music, had music arranged, and played it well. But if anything, the cultural background, you don't want to lose. American culture has been dominated quite often by purely commercial interests, and they want people to eat potato chips instead of boiled potatoes with butter, you know. And if anything, these traditional values in music and the kind of music we play have to be cultivated, not only maintained or given respect, they have to be cultivated. And as far as playing something with style, there's no excuse whatsoever for not playing a piece well, because we have access to 400 years of great music. And we have access to the greatest recordings of people that know, and access nowadays to all kinds of music. And you just have to listen, and then incorporate what you feel good, what you feel is what you like, what you feel is necessary into your own style. There's no excuse for poor music. There's never been an excuse for poor musicianship. The public schools, the music school system, very important. Here we start the kids over here. They're still in their diapers. That answer your question?
Yeah. Hey, Doug, we got time for one more, man. Ask one more question, then we got to get out.
Okay.
All right. Okay?
Haha.
You're a busy guy. What's next for you? What are you going to do next?
A good question. The concept here is that you work 65, right? If you're a state employee, a musician, or a teacher, it's 65 and out. So I started when I was 20, so I only have 5 more years, and then I can retire. Let's see, 20 and 65 is 85.
There you go. There you go.
You're going to retire.
Yeah. Good question. Good question. But the other thing is, of course, is that you have to have other interests as well. Otherwise, you don't want to put all the eggs in one basket. If the basket falls, it won't be a happy Easter, you know. And sometimes if something, you work yourself, you paint yourself into a corner. Well, when you see that happening, do something else. Do something else. Take a walk in the woods, or drop around the house, or crawl underneath the car until you're covered with grease and dirt, you know, and then get up the next day. The other thing is that everyone gets knocked down now and then, either a health problem or an accident, or by doing some stupid things. And if that happens, you got to get up and try again, you know. But I can't answer that question. I've been blessed with good health, have a good family, and I think for the next year or two, my shop and my mouthpieces will keep me busy. Teaching, we haven't been allowed to teach. I have not been permitted to teach in the past year, and at least not direct man to man. You know? Oh, you're showing some interesting pictures there.
Yeah, man. Well, we got to show you off just a little bit before we sign off here. Hey, right. Quinn, can we bring us back up again, please, man? And I've had a wonderful time today. I hope everybody out there has had a wonderful time, and I just can't thank you enough, Bob, for taking a little bit of time and talking to us today. It's just an absolute joy for me. I know Doug was actually a little nervous going to talk to the man today. And Doug, you got anything else to say before we sign off on this?
Thank you so much. We've kept you up very late, and I am so grateful for this time. It far exceeded any expectations I had. Thank Absolutely. You for everything you've done for our community, and keep building those mouthpieces. And thank you for the inspiration. And I mean, you single-handedly raised the standards of brass playing in Europe, and then the standards of instrument playing. And You've helped us all with creating good equipment. And, I went to one of your master classes when you were here in Los Angeles, maybe 20, 25 years ago. And I still think about the things you said. So I know you're also an excellent teacher. And this has just been a phenomenal hour. I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's given me new energy and new desire to keep out of people's way. But thank you very much. Good fortune to everyone. We're living in challenging times. It won't be easy. As John mentioned, when it comes back, it's going to be different. One has to spend much time thinking about how we can continue what we love to do in the future. One has to think ahead more than ever now. One has to think more than ever. The future is always made up of good things in the past, and so there's enough reference. It's a new challenge. It's just a new challenge. General MacArthur said, well, I'm not retreating, I'm advancing in another direction, in a new direction. So we have to do that. We have to advance in a new direction. Now, we can't lie down, we can't lose what we have, and help other people. If we're established, it's no problem. We know what we're doing, we have experience, we have, but young people, they need advice. Young people sometimes don't quite know how to come to terms with new situations. So that's the only thing I can say. Thank you very, very much. It's wonderful to see you. Wonderful to hear you. I see those beautiful tubas in your studio there. I'd love to hear every one of them.
Well, hey, wise words and many thanks from the one and only Robert Tucci. And everybody out there, I'd like to thank you for tuning in this week. You can catch this one up on YouTube later on today if you missed us. Also, next week we'll be back again on Sunday because some of us are working at 3:00. And who do we got next week, Doug?
We've got the legendary Zach Spellman
I
of
know.
the San Francisco Opera.
Oh,
So I'm really looking forward to talking to Zach. Once again, my many thanks to Mr. Tucci for staying up late. Doug, thanks as always for another great show, man. And everybody out there, have a wonderful afternoon, evening, or morning, and we'll talk to you really soon. Thanks again.
bye-bye.
Thank you.